We are back. I'm just telling the story. Pretty hectic at the conference, and I left my phone here the first episode, and didn't realize I didn't have it, and had a little bird in my ear saying, "I think I need to be back at 1 o'clock." But it taught me how dependent we are on technology, because without that phone, I was shot. So this is a continuation of a 8-year conversation, really, starting with Daryl at Microsoft. What his visions for the campus was way back, and then of course meeting Emmanuel, and then of course meeting you. And journeys like this don't happen overnight, right? They are long, and the continuation goes to a Realcomm Live, I think, that we did on a Friday probably 4 months ago. You're keeping us surprised at what's going on. Microsoft then introduced us to Scott, who we had our 30-minute call or 60-minute call that ended up being 2 hours on a Friday afternoon. And after I hung that up, I go, most people are at the bar or golfing. And we were really enjoying the conversation. We were talking about Disney World and Epcot and smart cities and a lot of common ground. So this, as you know, is Realcomm Live, and we're not going live on Friday. We brought the live to the conference. So we're doing this all day today, all day tomorrow. And literally probably going to have about 30 conversations like this. And
wow.
So we got another 30 weeks of programming. We're streaming live, as you know, on the web. And P.S., with your might, can you please socialize this? Because
of course.
Our viewership is good for a little niche business community, but it does annoy me when these celebrities with nothing to say have millions of viewers, and we're trying to help the world. So anything you can do with Microsoft would be appreciated. So for those of you who were not fortunate enough to sit on the general session, it was one of the best, my best ever.
Great.
Not that I thought you all thought it was the best, but from my vantage point, this was my 23rd, and I know the topics and everything like that. And between the technology that Sean provided and the content from guys like you and the other speakers, it was top 3, no doubt.
That was excellent.
Excellent, thank you.
And so those folks didn't get to see it, so I apologize for being a little redundant. If you can maybe give a minute of your journey, where you came from, around the world, slide into Microsoft. Scott will do the same, and then I'm going to just throw a couple questions at you guys.
Great, yeah. My smart building journey started out in Singapore, where I was working on driving energy and sustainability, but at the same time, transforming the state of smart buildings, of shifting how people view buildings as only FM, and getting them to look at buildings as treasure troves of data, which they then use to become building managers and optimize the way they use data to manage and govern their buildings.
Was it private or government building?
It was Microsoft working with a large governmental agency that owned a large amount of industrial land, and one of their core focuses was, how do we ensure we have labor to drive the next generation of building management, and how do we make this space attractive? That's where it started for me. And when we got down that route, my inspiration was, there is so much more that we can do in space. There is so much more with respect to experiences, because Singapore is a small country. Space is a premium. How do we drive effectiveness of space? And that effectiveness led to looking at spaces from an experience. So experiential-led building design is what that evolved to. And that allowed me to travel the globe, talking to multiple owners, developers, stakeholders, as to how can you build smart buildings, focusing on the experience where the tenant or the human loves to come into that space. Doing that bunch of work, a bunch of projects out across Asia, across the Middle East. And when Microsoft broke ground for our East Campus modernization up in Redmond, Washington, I was then offered the opportunity to come down and help drive the digital.
So you were with
transformation
Microsoft in Singapore?
Yep.
Got it. So they just saw what you were doing over there in the Middle East and said, "This guy knows what he's doing. We're going to give him a campus," or one of the people who gets the campus. That's a big. Just interesting enough, if I look at my career in the smart building, smart city world, started with Disney, Epcot. We talked about that a little bit on our call. Then went to Ken Sakamura in Tokyo, Tron, Real Operating Network. And then interesting, I would say one of the major milestones was Singapore, 04. We went on our immersion trip looking at smart buildings throughout Asia. Capitol Towers, GIC, corporate headquarters, Harry Gunasingham. The phone rang, the toilet flushed. I mean, I had never seen a building that automated. And then from there, Harry got us to the Middle East, which I'm sure we probably passed each other in Sheikh Mohammed Boulevard, or Crazy, crazy. So how many months, years are you into the project?
So we kicked off the project, the digital transformation of it, in 2018.
Okay.
And as per our initial projections, we are now looking on track to have our campus up and running somewhere around 2023. No exact dates, but 2023 is what we are targeting to. And we actually showed videos where we started with a hole in the ground in 2018, a big, huge, massive hole in the ground, which holds a 4-story substructure for underground parking, where today, substructure is done and the buildings have started to come up. So when we look at it, it's like major achievement and leap forward. When we started, it was just barren land, which we demoed. But now you have buildings
and now
space
the
coming
fun
up out
starts
of it.
for you guys, because that's all the details that go into these
Absolutely.
experiences, everything. So Scott, your journey.
I've only been in the real estate genre for 2 years.
Okay.
I've been in Microsoft for 15.
So you know the culture, you know the technology.
Yeah, and I was in the technology, one of the technology groups in our internal Microsoft IT and engineering groups, doing application development, doing global service deployment, supporting critical business IT systems.
So how did you make the pivot to the real estate side?
So I was always interested in the real estate technology, and I had heard about this position for Center of Innovation for the real estate group, and I had been doing a lot of innovation technology work inside our engineering team, and it just seemed like the ideal fit for what my interest was.
Did that Center of Innovation have anything to do with that digital house that you had built up at corporate? It had the kitchen and the bedroom, and they literally built a house of the future right next to your executive briefing center. And then Daryl had done an innovation center on the facility side where he was bringing out any connection with those projects?
Not that I'm aware of. Are you?
No, so what you're talking about, Jim, is the Industry Experience Center.
Right, exactly.
Where we showcase the next generation, latest and greatest tech that could potentially transform the future. Connected in a way, because they take inspiration from the work that
Right.
Scott does and we do, and we try to create a model showcase.
Right. Yeah.
But our aspect, I think where the challenge comes in for us is we have to now scale that out and get it out there.
So-
I think the inspiration was our leader, Michael Ford, who's the corporate vice president of what we call GWS now, Global Workplace Services. He wanted us to be able to skate to where the puck was going. Like, these projects are incredibly long, right? He wanted to make sure that Emmanuel, his team, the rest of my team, we're doing the research, we're planning, we're surveying the industry and trying to build for the future and build in flexibility and agility.
Yep.
And then we're a very data-driven company, so a large part of our digital transformation strategy is the collection of data and the agility, exercising agility based off the data we get. And there just wasn't a specific innovation group inside, but with this big project that Emmanuel was doing the DT plan for, and other public large construction projects coming up, we thought it would be a great time to get ahead.
But you just contradicted yourself. A piece of real estate, 30 years, right, at least, needs to be flexible? I'm joking,
Yeah.
but those are kind of oil and vinegar. That's right. I mean, we build a brick, it's there for 100 years, and now we have to create these places that one day it's one thing and the next day it's another.
But there's a lot of, the physical and digital combination of things. There's a lot of options to look at that asset and change it without a huge tenant improvement, without massive, tearing the walls apart. So there is a way to do what you're saying, which is change it multiple times, reconfigure it. So we're going with non-structural things, right? Movable furniture where teams can organically rearrange workspaces, right? We're going with lick and stick sensors, right? If we want to quickly just put something in and gather some data to develop algorithms or relationships, and then we can easily
Not hardwired.
so we don't have to rip out walls or run cabling. Now we do that when we think there's a durable piece, but the point is the agility and the flexibility, whether it's leased or owned.
The way I can relate to that, putting on an event like this, is, we have 3 session rooms over there, and then the room behind it, we have to build a big general session set, which is always more expensive than people should have to pay, and you use it for 3 hours.
Right.
And they build a city, and then they have to tear it down, right? A little respect, that's what happens in the exhibit floor. So the pain we learned from COVID, right, at hybrid events and everything, I said, wait a minute, what if we had 3 session rooms and we had 3 screens, and then when we need a big room, we just open the 2 doors, and then when we're done, we put the walls back and it goes back. So we absolutely maximize the real estate and absolutely maximize the technology. And P.S., if I would have had a general session in the other room, I wouldn't have had 3 screens, I probably would have had 1, so now I had this more grand look on what it looked like. But unless you're playing here and trying and experimenting and failing, you don't know that.
That's right.
Yeah, you know, Jim, when you look at a building, structurally we have evolved, aesthetically we have evolved. But what, to Scott's point, the foundation is done. Now the foundation stays for multiple decades, and you said 100 years. We have buildings 100 years old.
Right.
What we try to drive is how do you drive modernization of the space in between those walls? Either having dynamic, flexible rooms, either having data capturing sensors that allow you to curate the experiences for the audiences that you have in there, which will be as simple as motivating people to go through a certain direction because they'll have the best overview of everything that you've designed, or getting them directly from point A to point B in the shortest possible time with the least frustration. So your comment on how do buildings evolve, our aspiration is buildings will grow with the needs of the occupant, where the structure remains the same, the core and shell will cater for the growth of the building, but the TI services become digital now, where all the services start to evolve as the occupant's needs start to evolve.
So, to me, if somebody said, you know, give me your 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 25-year perspective, what is the number one issue topic? Mine is adoption and the rate, okay? So the year's probably 20 years, so call it 2000-ish. We're at a building called Tech Space in Irvine, California. An Irvine company executive left, started this new concept 20 years ago. I think WeWork. And the idea was to have this flex space, pool table, beer keg, but they even went so far as to have the walls. So the idea was you come in as a startup, there's 2 of you, and you get the little 100-foot room, right? And they had this key system where his engineers could literally, in a turn of a couple keys and moving in some walls, you could be a 4-person company in 2 hours.
Right.
Okay, but that was 20 years ago. Okay, and it took WeWork another 13, 14 to start to get established, to now where everybody's talking the WeWork model. Why does it take our industry so long to change?
I would say a couple things, and you guys have more tenure in the industry than me, but in general, for change, it's kind of like technology. It's Moore's law, right? So as things have gotten more advanced technologically, and even the physical furniture and amenities businesses, I think there's just been an acceleration at the rate of change. People are more used to change, particularly in tech, where you get this exponential rate of change, and it's even increasing more.
Do you remember the cubes? I mean, they come in, they bolt them in, and you'd have your little 8 feet, square feet, or 8 by 8.
And so, at least in the last 2 years, I've seen quite a bit of change in the thinking, mostly driven by the crisis that we're all kind of hopefully coming out of now.
So
but it's driven a lot of ingenuity. So I think, and one of I think it was Mr. Yardy today, was talking about sometimes a crisis is what drives a sea change. And we've had one in the last few years, so I've seen a tremendous acceleration. And so maybe it's kind of this event.
And it was interesting that he pointed out for the last 4 decades, there's always been, I remember the savings and loan, I remember .com, I remember financial, and then this one's a pandemic. It seems at the beginning of each decade we have a major event that causes pain, that forces change.
I think people are listening also to their employees and guests and customers and partners more, and I think they realize to do user-centric or occupant-centric or partner-centric processes and change things to try and accommodate people is important in customer relationship management. It's important in employee retention and recruitment, and I think people are just becoming more aware. So at least in the last few years that I've been involved, we see a real rate of change.
So
I'll probably add to that. When I look at buildings today, I would compare them to an orchestra. You have individually musical instruments play really well, but you never know how they would sound in combination with the entire group till you play together. Buildings as a whole have always had disparate systems, and the disparity between them is huge. You have a lighting system that gives light. You have heating and cooling system that takes care of heating and cooling. What is the relationship between light and heating and cooling? You have a building automation system that takes care of all the controls in the building. You have a parking management system that deals with cars. The evolution of how do they all work together in conjunction was hard to visualize. To Scott's point, where all of a sudden you now bring a user which says, guys, the building meets my basic needs of shelter, but I want a lot more because I'm paying premium for that asset. So now all of a sudden we say, how can you give you a lot more? And that's the trigger for the change agent. So that happens by orchestrating data flow across all these systems because the industry has no need for it and they never want it because you're happy if you park your car, right? You don't care about access to a building as you park your car. But now with the load on human beings, with the cognitive load that's happening on them and the importance for safeguarding time and giving time back, the orchestration of data has started to set in where it is the more you share, the more you gain. And now the community has realized that. So I would say we're at the cusp of it. We're just starting. But we will grow into a situation where buildings of the future will, in addition to being stores of data, there will be stores of orchestrated data that positively impact human behavior.
Well said.
We could talk for another 3 hours at least. We're out of time. Mary gave me the sign, but hopefully you guys will come back on our Friday show, Realcomm Live, okay? Next question I was going to ask you is about the features and why are these buildings going to be different? Let's save that for another episode if you guys wouldn't mind. And again, thank you so much for all of your time.
Perfect. Thank you.
The prep this morning, yesterday, today. We can't do what we do unless people like you are doing what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, that wraps this episode or segment of Realcomm Live with two great executives from Microsoft.